May 13th, 1935. A quiet country road in Dorset, England. A man is lying on the ground, bleeding. A twisted heap of metal and chrome lies a few feet away. The man is Thomas Edward Lawrence, better known to the world as Lawrence of Arabia. The machine that threw him? The Brough Superior SS100. At that moment, the world lost a war hero, but it also cemented a legend. This wasn't just a motorcycle crash. It was the tragic end of a love affair between a man and the fastest, most dangerous, most beautiful machine ever built. They called it the Rolls-Royce of Motorcycles. Today, collectors will kill to get their hands on one. But be warned, this bike demands respect. Because if you don't respect the Superior, it might just be the last thing you ever ride. To understand this bike, you have to understand the man who built it, George Brough. George was not a modest man. He was arrogant, he was brilliant, and he was obsessed. His father made motorcycles too, branded simply as Brough. But George looked at his father's bikes and said, "These aren't good enough." He wanted perfection. So in 1919, he split from his father and started his own company, and the name he chose? Brough Superior. Imagine the guts it takes to call your brand superior just to spite your own father. George didn't want to build mass-market transport. He wanted to build art. He famously wore pristine white gloves while inspecting the final assembly. If his white glove found a single speck of grease or dust, the entire bike was stripped down and rebuilt. He was the Steve Jobs of the 1920s. And here is my favorite story about his ego. A journalist called the bike the Rolls-Royce of Motorcycles. Now usually, Rolls-Royce would sue you for trademark infringement. They sent an executive to George's factory to shut him down. But after the executive saw the workers hand polishing the nickel plating and saw the engine internals assembled like Swiss watches, he was stunned. Rolls-Royce didn't sue. Instead, they gave George Brough official permission to use their name. That has never happened before, and it will never happen again. So let's talk about the masterpiece. The SS100. Introduced in 1924, this thing was a spaceship compared to everything else on the road. Most bikes back then struggled to hit 50 miles per hour. They leaked, they rattled, and they broke down constantly. The SS100 was different. It had a massive 1000cc V-twin engine from Jap, J.A. Prestwich. It was a monster. But here is the kicker. Every single SS100 was road tested by George Brough himself. He would take the bike out to a stretch of public road and ride it until the speedometer hit 100 miles per hour. If it didn't hit 100, he sent it back to the engineers. Every customer received a signed certificate guaranteeing that this specific machine had been timed at over 100 miles per hour. Think about that. 100 miles per hour in the 1920s, on terrible roads, with no rear suspension, and with brakes that were basically just hopeful thoughts. It was terrifying. And the luxury. These bikes weren't just built, they were tailored. When you ordered an SS100, George would measure you like a suit. Handlebars, foot pegs, seat height, everything was adjusted to the rider's physical size. It cost 170 pounds. That sounds cheap now, but back then it was the price of a nice house. This was a toy for aristocrats, speed freaks, and adrenaline junkies. And the biggest adrenaline junkie of them all was T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. After the war, Lawrence was trying to escape his fame. He wanted anonymity. He wanted to feel alive. And he found that feeling on a Brough Superior. He didn't just own one. He owned 7 of them. He named them all George after the creator. George 1, George 2, all the way up to George 7. He wrote letters to George Brough that sound like love letters. He wrote about the silken power of the engine. He called the bike a skittish horse with a heart of fire. Lawrence rode hard. He would wake up at dawn and blast across the English countryside at top speed, chasing airplanes, racing storms. For a man haunted by the memories of war, the focus required to ride an SS100 at 100 miles per hour was the only thing that quieted his mind. In 1935, he was waiting for the delivery of his 8th bike, the George 8th, but he never got to ride it.
May 13th. Lawrence is riding his beloved George VII down a narrow road near his cottage. He knows the road intimately. He is flying over the blind crest of a hill. Suddenly, 2 young boys on bicycles appear right in front of him. They are hidden by a dip in the road. Lawrence has a split-second choice: hit the boys or swerve. He swerves. The handlebars clip the rear wheel of a bicycle. The heavy Brough Superior loses control. Lawrence is thrown over the handlebars, head first onto the asphalt. He wasn't wearing a helmet. Nobody wore helmets back then. He lay in a coma for 6 days before passing away. The nation mourned. But out of this tragedy came a revolution. One of the doctors treating Lawrence, a young neurosurgeon named Hugh Cairns, was devastated by the brain injury he saw. He began a study. He realized that if Lawrence had been wearing protection, he might have lived. Because of Lawrence of Arabia's crash on a Brough Superior, Dr. Cairns campaigned for mandatory crash helmets for military dispatch riders. That eventually led to the helmet laws we have today. So every time you strap on a helmet, you are part of Lawrence's legacy.
World War II eventually shut down the Brough Superior factory in 1940. The records say only about 3,000 were ever made, and for decades they were just old bikes. But then the legend grew. In 2015, a startling discovery was made in a dusty barn in Bodmin Moor, UK. Under piles of old machinery and dust sheets, they found not 1, but 8 Brough Superiors. They had been sitting there, rotting, for 50 years. It was the motorcycle equivalent of finding a chest of pirate gold. These rusty heaps of metal, missing parts, covered in bird droppings, sold at auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars each. Today, a pristine SS100 can fetch over $500,000. The brand has even been revived, building modern, high-tech versions in France. But nothing compares to the original. The Brough Superior SS100 stands alone. It represents a time when engineers were artists, when safety was secondary to speed, and when a motorcycle was built not just to transport the body, but to transport the soul. Thanks for watching.